Hi, I'm Dennis Green, and I'm glad that you're joining me tonight. I hope that everything works like it's supposed to. But if it doesn't, then I'm also recording this, and we'll have a chance to look at it later if for some reason the internet gods and the bandwidth gods aren't with me and too many people are watching Netflix for me to get good bandwidth. Appreciate you joining me for this reading tonight. For History Center constituents, this will be a little bit of a different experience than other author presentations that the History Center is sponsored, because most author talks that the History Center presents are from writers who publish nonfiction about, well, history. I write fiction, science fiction. So what on earth am I doing on the History Center's Facebook page? Well, even though my books aren't based on reality, they take place in real locations. Places in Cedar Rapids, in Iowa City, in Decorah, in Anamosa, in my hometown of Council Bluffs. And that sense of place is, I think, one of the things that have made the Traveler books resonate with people who don't normally read a lot of science fiction. Long story short, I'm grateful to Jenny, Jason, and the staff for taking a chance and letting me on this platform. This month is exactly 10 years since I first started writing Traveler, the first of the books that make up the trilogy that I'm going to talk about tonight. If you've heard me speak before, you may know the story of how Lennox Randon, Rob Klein, and I all embarked on a journey to write and publish books. And we all succeeded, multiple times, in fact, before Randon's cancer finally caught up with him. While fiction, all of our books reflected our personal history. Randon's first book, Friends, Dogs, Bullets, Lovers, took place in Dubuque, Iowa, and Austin, Texas, both places where he had lived. Rob's Murder by the Slice takes place in Cumberton, a thinly veiled version of Cedar Rapids. The Traveler books are a wild sci-fi ride through parallel universes as the hero, Trav Becker, encounters many different versions of his home and friends while trying to solve a string of bizarre killings. Along the way, we get to know various versions of Trav, a detective on the local police force, his best friend Sam, a particle physicist, Trav's girlfriend Mary, Morgan, a psychic, and Anton Caro, a dangerous crime boss. Trav's hometown is never named in the books, but the locations where he spends time present plenty of Easter eggs, and I think we'll have some familiar mental images for you, and I'll have some pictures and videos to jog your memory along the way. So come with me now to a city that might bear some resemblance to the one where you live. One of the first things we learn about the town where Traveler takes place is that it contains a Division I university where Sam works in physics research. I haven't spent much time in Madison, Wisconsin, but that's probably kind of the size of this town, a busy Midwestern city with prosperous businesses and unique neighborhoods and a big college. I spent a fair amount of time in college at the UI's physics building, now named Van Allen Hall. James Van Allen apparently is still alive in the Travelerverse because this building isn't named for anybody. It's just called Building 231. Here's how it's described in Traveler. Building 231 was one of the taller buildings on campus, with the tall, narrow windows that had been the architectural rage for institutional design in the early 70s. Inside, if the honey-colored wood trim wouldn't have given away the building's vintage, the long, dimly lit halls lined with narrow doors leading to tiny offices bespoke the pre-cubicle era. We'll get to go inside Building 231 a little bit later. Most of the action in the Traveler books takes place in bars. Hey, they tell you to write what you know. Early on, Trav is called to an altercation at a seedy place called the Kremlin. When I started the book, the New Bohemia neighborhood was just taking shape and hadn't become the place that we know it today, even pre-pandemic. In Traveler, the transformation was a little more problematic because the neighborhood didn't surrender its original seedy character quite so easily. The Kremlin is located right along 12th Avenue. I think that it's kind of where Gaucho's is in the former 3rd Street Live, now Olympic Theater building, is now. Here's a description. We passed east through Campus Town and approached the river, home to a warehouse district where the skeletons of heavy equipment manufacturing centers were gradually being remade into industrial-styled lofts and condos, with funky shops, galleries, small restaurants, and lounges on the ground floors. We pulled up to one such building. It pretty much sat square on the border between the gentrified neo-bohemian style of the reclaimed neighborhood and the decaying structures that had gone unclaimed by urban developers. As Leon had said earlier, the location of the bar was problematic. Prosperous, white-collar kids wandered in from their nearby urban lofts, not realizing they were crossing a Mason-Dixon line to an area that was home to a rough clientele. Like the building that housed it, the owner straddled the line between reputable and disreputable, although I knew which side of that line he spent most of his time on. Anton Caro had started out as a penniless refugee from some former Soviet satellite whose name was all K's and X's. Using superb street smarts and an army of fellow refugees who followed his orders like an infantry battalion, he was able to take over most of the criminal ventures in the city in a couple of years. From this bar, his seat of power, Caro controlled the lucrative drug trade common to most college towns, and most other criminal enterprise as well. Now, the climax of Traveler takes place in an old warehouse that this Eastern European criminal, this Anton Caro, owns. It was inspired by the great old retailers of Cedar Rapids and also my hometown of Council Bluffs, notably Smulikov's. And there, transformed today to something else, is the old Smulikov's warehouse. In Traveler, the big former downtown retailer that every town had at one time is called Siemens. And Old Man Siemens and his retail empire that crumbled in the 80s or 90s would end up playing a big part in the entire series. A key feature of the store, and my story, was something called a cash railway system, which in the story was moved from the warehouse or to the warehouse from the store after a remodel. Viewers of a certain age may remember these. There were no cash registers anywhere in the store. A customer's money or check was put into a latched metal container about the size of a soup can. The container was then clipped to a fast-moving belt, which was surrounded by a narrow wire enclosure, not much wider around than the container itself. The store's ceiling was covered with a complex spider web of the tracks, like a tiny monorail system, which zipped the little box to the cashier's office, where the purchase was recorded and change made, then sent back. Most cash railways like this were eventually replaced by pneumatic tubes, the kind still in use by bank drive-ups, before they were wiped out by the parallel evolutionary line of cash registers. When Siemens made the switch, the cash railway was moved to the warehouse, allowing for paperwork and pickup receipts to be stored in the second-floor office, but still easily accessed. Both that second-floor office and the cash railway play a big part in the climax of Traveler. One of the most fun things about the Traveler books is that the parallel universe conceit allowed me to take scenes and locales, even people, and remix them. The second book, Prisoner, is where that really started to happen. In Traveler, Trav's climactic battle with Anton Caro and his henchmen takes place on a stream of reality where the Siemens warehouse is blown up. But based on that experience, Trav is able to rewrite things in his home universe to take place without loss of life or property. As Prisoner begins, about a year later, the area where much of the first book's action takes place looks a lot different. So for the second time that day, I found myself headed toward the district. Once again, I marveled at the transformation of the area. A year ago, the gentrification had only just begun to take place, affecting maybe a half dozen buildings. Go left instead of right, coming out of the funky vintage clothing boutique, and you could find yourself in front of a bombed-out structure full of homeless squatters. A case in point was the club where I was headed. The Kremlin had long served as Anton Caro's headquarters. It had been a trouble spot, as the nouveau cool and Caro's Goombas had never mixed well. All that had changed, though. More commercial development had improved the buildings abutting the club. The new owner seemed to be squeaky clean, and the Soviet theme was now just for ironic hipsters, not refugees looking for a taste of home. Morgan stood near a small knot of people gathered under the building's only outside feature, a scarlet square of red neon. Red Square. Get it? She waved as I drove slowly past. Note that Prisoner was published in 2013, 5 years before the Czech Village and Nubo started branding their combined neighborhoods as the district. Obviously, I should have copyrighted the phrase. When I was writing Prisoner, my Rotary Club toured the Geonetric building, and I incorporated the concept of a tech firm that also housed a new business incubator into the book. But while Geonetric built their building new, the Traveler version was a remodel. A remodel of, you guessed it, the same Seaman Warehouse building from the first book, complete with Cash Railway. Whenever I see Eric Engelman, I tell him, I blew up your building, but honest, only once. In addition to all the sci-fi stuff in Prisoner, Trav must also solve the kidnapping of 2 young girls. He's involved in a car chase with the suspect, but loses him in the middle of downtown. Trav can't figure out how that could have happened until he turns up some history on the man. Trav tells his partner Adam about his research. Did you ever look up Josh Dawson? I asked. Of course, Adam replied. Nothing. Well, I Googled him this morning. Aren't you president of the internet? I assume you found something. Yeah, the paper did a feature on him about 10 years ago. Seems that when he was a kid, his mom worked at Siemens Furniture. When she had a Saturday shift, he came with her. So, one day, he was poking around in the basement and found an old steam tunnel. Apparently, there are miles of them linking just about every building in the downtown. Over the years, he found all kinds of interesting stuff. That's what the article was about. After all the retail stores left downtown, they were writing features on the history of some of the buildings. Dawson took a reporter on a tour. One of the things they found was a boarded-up room in the back of the old Montrose Hotel. There had always been stories about Mr. Montrose running a speakeasy, but no one had ever found it. Until Dawson, Adam observed. Right. He'd spent hours playing in the room as a kid. There were still old liquor bottles, pictures on the wall, newspapers, even money in the cash register. The Historical Society took it all and made an exhibit of it in the museum. Now that you mention it, Adam said, I saw that exhibit in school. I remember wondering why they would put a dusty room filled with junk behind glass. When the teacher told me we were going to the museum, I thought we'd see dinosaurs. Instead, we got my grandma's basement. Culture is lost on some people, I said. Please note the cameo by the History Center, although young Adam was less than impressed with the exhibits, and the long-demolished Montrose Hotel. And the character who spent his youth crawling around downtown basements also has a real-life model. But please, no one tell Mark Stouffer Hunter I made him a kidnapper, although there ended up being some extenuating circumstances. For Trader, I needed a second bar. Remember, I told you, lots of things take place in bars in my books. Now, this is the one locale that ended up not being inspired by a local spot, but a club in DuPont Circle my wife and I visited in Washington, D.C. This is the 18th Street Lounge, a converted townhouse with room after room of velvet couches, cool bars, and music rooms. When it was a residence, it was obviously quite luxurious. And as a club, it was cool because it was like going to a different bar each time you changed floors. When we were there, it was packed. and I imagined our heroes popping in and out of versions of the structure, some teeming with people, others empty and dusty, because in some realities, the remodeling hadn't taken place. I decided the Traveler version of New Bow would be the perfect place for our old friend, Mr. Siemens, to have built himself a row house modeled on the ones that he had seen out east. Of course, in our reality, we once had a 3rd Street Live, now the Olympic Theater, so the 18th Street Lounge became the 3rd Street Lounge. Trader also marked a return to Building 231, Van Allen Hall. In fact, the UI Physics Building and the Kremlin Bar are the only locations to figure prominently in all 3 books. For Trader, several key scenes take place on the roof of the building. That's where the university maintains an observatory, and one where I spent time with friends who were science majors when I was in college. Building 231 is the headquarters of Traveler's Big Bad, a mad genius version of Trav's best friend Sam called simply the Boss. To help him, the Boss has gone out and recruited dozens of versions of Trav Becker to make up his own private army. Trav fights this legion of his doubles on a stairway in the building, which is my take on a famous hallway fight from a Netflix series based on the Marvel hero Daredevil. Trav and his friends are finally captured and taken to the building's big lecture hall, where every seat is occupied by a Trav Becker, who turn as one and watch Trav when he enters. Creepiest thing I've ever written. There was one other real-life place I wanted to put in the books. Mary, Trav's girlfriend, is a violinist and concertmaster for the local symphony orchestra. In fact, Orchestra Iowa's music director and my friend Tim Hankowich makes off-screen cameos in both Prisoner and Trader. When Trav and his friends needed a place to hide and plan, the theater where Mary's orchestra practiced and performed was an obvious choice, which meant I got to write in one of my favorite places in the world in the book, the Paramount Theater. In Traveler, it goes by its original name. The Capitol Theater had begun its life as a movie house in the 1920s. One of those huge single-screen theaters that sat nearly 2,000. It featured one of the first air conditioning units west of the Mississippi. After it closed, the orchestra had run a capital campaign to update and remodel it. Mary taught at the symphony school and had keys to the building. Our heroes relax, recharge, and plan in the theater's green room, which is on the 2nd floor. But not for long. Their enemies soon find them, and they find themselves fleeing for their lives down downtown streets that are going to look pretty familiar to you. Sophie, Adam, and Leon looked up at us, jaws agape as we appeared from nowhere. The 2 men closed ranks in front of the girl, then relaxed as they recognized us. Suddenly, the room started to spin, and I sank to my knees. "Trav!" Mary cried. "No time. They're right behind us." I grit my teeth and managed to climb to my feet. "He just grazed me. We gotta go." Mary rolled her eyes and slipped my arm around her shoulders. I winced as the wound in my side stretched and reopened. We launched ourselves down the stairs and spilled out onto the 1st floor, slamming the stage door open with a bang. Outside, I spied a dumpster. Together, Adam and I rolled it in front of the door. We sprinted across the street. As we rounded the corner, I heard a banging behind us. Man Bun had arrived, certainly with reinforcements. If we could just get out of their sight, we might be able to buy ourselves some breathing room. Mary led us through a small plaza that lay in between an office building and a parking garage. She turned left, running past the entrance to the garage, and finally called a halt at the next corner, putting her hands on her knees to catch her breath. "Next order of business," Morgan said. "We can't stay out on the street. Where do we go? We're exposed here." "She's right," Leon said. "We have to get someplace where we can defend." I got my bearings and realized our headlong flight had carried us into the district. Motioning Leon and Adam to watch our rear, we started down the street. Turning left, I stopped next to a weathered door. "Ring any bells?" I asked Carl. He stared at me blankly. I fished my keys out of my pocket and found the correct one. "I'm sure you could pick this lock," I continued, "but let's do it the easy way." I slid the key into the deadbolt. It turned easily. We started up the stairs in the empty building, in what, on another reality stream, was known as the 3rd Street Lounge. The 3rd Street Lounge is located about where the old Sokol Gym was, on 3rd Street, across from the map room. I compressed downtown Cedar Rapids somewhat for this book. The Paramount and Nubo or the Capitol Theater, I should say, and Nubo are only a block or two apart instead of the, 7 or 8 blocks that they are in real life. But that would have been a long way for my heroes to run. Before I close, I'd like to share one last bit from the end of Trader. This talk has been mainly about art imitating life. Well, here is where life imitates art. The scene takes place, you guessed it, in a bar. $200 guarantee, John, or 80% of what we do at the door, whichever is greater. The pianist took a sip from the beer I had just served him and looked at his bandmates. You good with that, Chris? He asked. The drummer nodded as he scratched his beard. Drew? The bassist looked up from a notebook in which he'd been shading in the sides of an intricate abstract drawing. Yeah. We shook hands all around. Meet John Snell, Drew Morton, and Chris Jensen, 3 jazz musicians who are all Traveler fans. In fact, Drew, who was sketching in that excerpt, is also a graphic artist. He designed the cover of all 3 of the Traveler books. Now, when John, the piano player, found out that I had put him and Drew and Chris together in a trio, he called the other 2 up, and they actually booked a gig, which was canceled by COVID, of course, but I have hopes we'll get to hear them together sometime soon. Well, that concludes our tour of the real-life places that inspired the scenes in my books. I just want to thank the History Center once again for giving me this forum to talk about some aspects of my books that I don't get to share often. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to read the Traveler Trilogy, I've just put out a 3-in-1 ebook that you can get on Amazon. Of course, you should really buy physical copies from our excellent local bookstores. In Cedar Rapids, that's Next Page Books in Nubo or Swamp Fox Books in Marion. Any other bookstore can order them too. Links and information on my website, DennisWGreen.com. I want to thank you once again for taking the time to watch the video. And everybody, stay warm, stay safe, and have a good night.